Welcome to Guy Code, a podcast dedicated to imparting dad wisdom to my son, with your host, Koji Steven Sakai, and friends.
All righty. Welcome. This is Koji, and this is episode 39. I wanted to impart all my wisdom to my son, but my son already thinks he knows more than me. So instead of trying to tell him and have it go one ear and out the other ear, I decided to record these here with the hopes that maybe, just maybe in the future, when he's ready, he'll listen to my advice and not make the same stupid mistakes I made. I'll also bring on guests that will impart their wisdom as well. And I already know that their advice will be better than mine. So this week I brought on my friend. He's a producer. He's also a dad, Brian Yang. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Koji.
No problem. Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I am, as you said, a producer and a dad, and a very occasional actor too sometimes. But yeah, these days in the pandemic life, I'm definitely more of those two. Dad first and foremost with my 2.5-year-old. What can I say? Raised in the Bay Area, live here in LA, not too far from where you are. But spent a good deal of my life in New York, where I kind of came of age and found myself on this track of film and, content making, for better or worse. And moved out to LA about 7 or 8 years ago to just get back to the left coast where my family's from, but also to jump into the fray of Hollywood. And so, here I am down in the South Bay and watching the world burn and churn right now. And we're about, as we're recording this, 3 weeks away from like D-Day. So yeah, fingers crossed here.
Everything's going to be okay because the Lakers won. So I can see now. 2020 is going to get better. That was the first sign of things changing for the better. So
okay. Yeah. All right. I hope so. I'm not a Laker fan, but I'm glad they won for the city, for Kobe, obviously. And if what you say comes true, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think ultimately, I think Trump was a weak candidate before this whole COVID anyway. I mean, the fact that he was even close and the economy was doing so well was a sign that he was a weak candidate. And when all this crap came out, then I think it became it's harder for him to win, especially if Texas is now kind of in question and Georgia's in question. I mean, if those two are in question, then he's in some serious trouble, I think. But I don't want to think. I think it depends on everybody going out to vote, making sure that they vote and do their thing. But I've been heartened by the lines at the early voting thing, because I think that's a good sign for
100%. I think, and everyone points to 16, the poll said this thing and look what happened. So let's not let that repeat itself. While sure, the polls are not foolproof, I do think there's a huge difference. We've suffered through the actual 4 years now, whereas before it was kind of like this, this guy's different. A lot of folks didn't like Hillary. Yeah. There was a lot of, the calculus was much different. And so now, it's, I'm fingers crossed expecting a resounding defeat, but I don't want to jinx it. So yes, everyone get out there, vote, and do your duty.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's get into this. We're going to talk about life advice today. So we're going to get some advice from you. So I'd love to hear some advice. Go ahead with your first one.
Sure. So I think that, I'm a living example of how you cannot blueprint your life. There's no way to map it out and have it go according to plan to perfect T. So I think that my advice to anyone listening, to your son, to people who are coming of age, is to really just be open-minded and to be adaptable, to what comes before you. So you might think that, I want to become a doctor one day or whatever, and sure, a lot of folks stick to that path. But if the forces of the universe or life, whatever, you take a class and you're inspired to do something else suddenly, or you fall down this rabbit hole, something that feels right. And I'm sorry, my daughter is in the background here.
I love it.
they, if that drives you a certain direction, don't resist. So I think, you can't plan too far ahead. It's good to have like goals and everything in life, but like you definitely want to be amenable and kind of like be able to improvise, if you will, because if you're too rigid about things, I think then you're gonna like set yourself up maybe for I don't know. There's different levels of like disappointment and just like, I just feel like clear mind, open heart, as you move forward in life, you're going to meet someone, you're going to, again, be inspired by someone, a professor, a teacher, or a piece of content you might see, a book you read. And so, unless you're like already on the road to becoming like an Olympic athlete or like the next Yao Ming because you're born 7'3", like, I think as you choose what to do with your life, really take it in, and let follow your heart, and what it's telling you. So that's kind of I guess that's my first piece of advice.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because I totally agree with you because my career is just like that as well. But on the other hand, I think about how, they say like you have to do like 10,000 hours in order to get great at something. And like, how do you like my problem is how do you reconcile those two things? Like, how do you reconcile, like, you're going to work really, really hard, but you have to be open to other stuff as well. What do you think about that?
Well, I think, the 10,000 hour rule is like, that, I don't, it's not like a hard or fast.
No, of course. Yeah.
I'm sure it's like, so once you do determine the track you want to go down, of course you've got to like, put your mind to it. And it's not to say you can't change your mind after some period of time if you're disgruntled. But so I don't think it has to be like, oh, I've got to start at age 9 and get my 10,000 hours in now.
Yeah.
Again, unless seriously, if you are some sort of like prodigy athlete that's like, you're going down this track and there's no other possible outcome for you. And even then you see a lot of kids burn out from that too. But but generally speaking, I think, you can reconcile what you do want to do and the hours you have to kind of honing your craft, because you're always going to be honing your craft, even into your later stages of life, right? You're always going to be learning something or feel like you can keep exercising these proverbial muscles, so I think your 10,000 hours is like, over the course of, not necessarily from like 9 to 12, or at that developmental age. Certainly it helps give you a leg up if you do something earlier in your life. I do believe that, but I think that can be drawn out over a period of your life. Yes, you don't want to be still getting 10,000 hours in at the age of like 80, like, but I think as you're still a relatively young person, and young is defined by a wide range, you can still figure that out. There's room to grow even into your 20s and 30s,
Yeah. I mean, I wish I started writing earlier, writing screenplays earlier. That would have been great. But my least favorite students, because I teach screenwriting, my least favorite students are always like, I don't need to take this class. And I'm always like, really? Because I take screenwriting classes. I love talking to other people who write. Like, I never stop learning. So I'm always surprised when other people think that they've already learned it all. And I'm like, okay. Like, I mean, people that aren't professionals, I mean,
right.
And so that's always interesting. But I love that piece of advice. If we've done 38 episodes and I've never heard that, I've always heard the opposite, which is figure out what you want to do early and work on it. So I like that because, I do think people change. Like you might start thinking about one thing, right? Like, this is what I want to do. And then you do it and you realize, that's not really what I want to do, but maybe I want to do something different, right? Like, I wanted to be a writer, and then I realized only when I started writing did I realize screenwriting is really what I wanted to do, right?
Right. Yeah.
But I didn't know that unless I start writing, unless I start doing that path.
I mean, you're in the ballpark, and like, and these days, like you might think, oh, I want to do this, and then you figure out, well, that's not the right fit, but there's something similar or in the realm, because like, say, oh, I want to go into finance. Well, what does that really mean? Like, there's traders, there's, I'm like going to botch all the terms, but like, you have wealth planners, you have like, different aspects of trading. I want to go into film and television. Well, what is it there? Like maybe you want to start off as an actor, which is like what I did. And then you realize, what, my skills are probably more suited for, writing or producing or, something else in the industry. So even though you had your heart set on one thing, like it can be a totally, you might have to take a detour or a left turn once you get there. And so then you're going to have to like you spend 10,000 hours like taking acting classes, but then the mindset of a director is totally different. And then what are you going to do? Like go, oh, I'm going to spend another 10,000 hours doing that. So I feel like you just have to be flexible. And you take pieces of what you, as you're growing, like, what you learn and what you kind of accumulate, and then you can apply them to other things.
Yeah.
So it's very amorphous, the way life goes, what's thrown to you. And so again, just, definitely don't be too rigid on things.
Yeah. And that's why one of the, to your sports analogy, it is important. I do think that, that we don't push our kids too early to one. I know right now, like a lot of the kids already at my son's age, they're already focusing on one sport. And I'm trying not to focus on him on one sport because I don't want him to get burned out. And I also want it to be fun. And I don't think it's great for your body necessarily to only do one sport at this age. I do think but once he gets to like 11, 12, 10, 11, 12 is when like he has to start to focus. But it's interesting because like you start to see like, I have friends who do club baseball at 8 years old, and my son should be doing club baseball, but it's like, I want him to play basketball still, and I want him to play baseball or soccer. Even though he's terrible at soccer, I want him to play soccer still because it's good for him to do other things, and it's good for the body, I think, to use their muscles. I always think about Wayne Gretzky. He talked about how when he was a kid, by the end of hockey season, he was done with hockey. He didn't want to play it anymore, and then he'd go do like whatever other sports. And by the time the end of the summer happened, he was like super excited about hockey again. And that made him like want to keep playing, learning. But nowadays, if you do it like 24 hours every day, like, it's just, you can get burned out. There's no way you can keep doing it, at some point.
Yeah, no, totally. I didn't know that about Wayne Gretzky, but that makes sense. And look, he still wound up being the greatest ever to do that. But yeah, I think it's important to have balance and just try different things, particularly at an early age. Yeah. So as you're still evolving and figuring yourself out.
Yeah. Because also the other thing about going too early in sports is I always feel like I'm worried as me as opposed to him. My child, like I don't want it to be like me pushing, because I know he's like, for example, I know he's really good at baseball, but I don't know if he loves it like me. And so I don't want him to be like, you have to do baseball if like, or like, I know he loves jujitsu, so jujitsu is different, but baseball is like my thing. And so I don't know if like he loves baseball. So I don't want to be like, let's play baseball 24 hours, let's play baseball.
Right. Yeah. No, totally. You're living through him, and you don't want to become that parent, that dad. Yeah. So,
but it's hard at this age because he also doesn't want to disappoint me at this age, right? To be like, I don't love baseball as much as you, and that's okay because I'm not living his life. But it's a challenge. But anyway, I'd love to hear your next piece of advice.
Yeah. I mean, you just said something a little earlier that sparked my second piece of advice, which was that you don't know everything, so don't ever act like you know everything. So while you want to be authentic and and like be able to express your opinions, your thoughts and viewpoints on things, I think it's important to listen to others because again, because you don't know everything. So you always have to keep an open mind. You always have to if you're not going to listen to your parents, listen to inspirational people, whether through podcasts, through speeches, reading books. Like I think the only way to learn about the world and just to become an open-minded person, to be a better person, and this year more than anything has taught us that we're so polarized as a society now. I hope the next generation gets their act together and brings things back for humanity's sake, is to again like engage. Don't have tunnel vision. If you think this my way's the only way and everyone else's opinions doesn't matter for worth anything, like I think that's just a recipe for contributing to what we are currently stuck in. And that's a sad reality, because we as parents to our kids are trying to set good examples, but then when you turn on, the news or just go on social media, like you spend 10 minutes and kids are like, why are the adults like fighting and so opinionated and like stuck in their ways? And it's just like, so you got to practice what you preach is like, it's a whole nother thing, but if you're trying to be a good parent, what else can you do? So I feel like, be respectful of other opinions and take those opinions seriously and synthesize all of the things that you see that are out there, and just, like, again, don't be afraid to say what you feel, but anyone that feels entitled or like, just that has this arrogant, leads with this arrogance in life and feels like it's always about them and that only their way of seeing things is the right way. Like I say, please don't live your life that way. It's going to just set you up for a lot of fights, a lot of disappointment, and just make for unhealthy mental living. So that's my second thing.
That's great advice. I mean, I always think about how I think I was reading in a book about how conservatives / Republicans only get their source of news from one place, whereas the Democrats and the left tend to get news from over average 2.5 to 3 places. And that just goes to show, it's like, I do think it's similar to what you're saying, is that you can't just get news. You can't just talk to the same people. You should be open to different people, different advice, and then be able to make your own mind up based on what you hear, which is frustrating because sometimes when I talk to people on the other side and they're like, this is how the world is. I'm like, like, they look at me and they say like, COVID's going well, or COVID's not real, or the economy is well. I'm like, are you guys looking at this? Like, what are you looking at? This is like totally, it's like you're looking at a different world, or there's no racism or systematic racism or any of this stuff. You're just like, what?
Right. Yeah. And it's okay. I mean, just because people don't agree with you, it doesn't mean that they're wrong or that you're better. But yeah, like you said, you should hear everything out, make up your own mind, and come to draw conclusions and live, by ideologies that are reasonable and sound, and like through sort of research and time spent with others and reading or whatever it is, before you just kind of like blindly or uniformly or stubbornly like say this is the hard line and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So I think that's the problem with society today, is like we're so resolute on things, we never advance forward. It's like Andrew Yang said, not left, not right, but forward.
No, but it's true. I mean, even what Andrew talks about, the minimum basic income, right? UBI. And that's like something that was like, when he was talking about it, people were like, this is crazy, we can't do that. And then COVID happened and everyone's like, maybe we all need to get like $500 a month or something. Like it's crazy that people, like, at the time when people first talked, like when he first talked about it, I mean, people on the fringe were talking about things, like I was talking about this before, but it wasn't common, right? It wasn't a common thing that people talked about. But once he starts talking about it, those that were listening, they started, oh, that might be a good idea, etc. And I think that it takes, for us to move forward as a society, that's the only way that could be. People thinking about things, people talking about it, debating it. How do we do it? How do we make it right? And but interesting. I love that one. I'd love to hear the next one.
I think it's important to also, as you move forward in life, just keep in mind, like, we're never gonna be successful at everything we do. We're gonna fail. It's like you'll fall 99 times. For the 100th time is successful kind of thing. Whatever you're doing, be it like a startup venture, like trying to sell a script, or whatever, like any realm of your life. So dating, exactly. Dating. Wait till you get to that conversation. But so I think it's like you gotta, like, you have to be able to accept failure, and not be too hung up on it, not be bogged down by it and harp on it. You have to just keep moving. You gotta learn from it, get better yourself, pivot, whatever it is, make adjustments. So like, maybe you have to look yourself in the mirror and go, you know what, I'm this area is a weakness of mine. I should, not, maybe I'm not good at writing comedy. I should just focus on horror. Maybe my approach with dating is I should stop with these dad jokes. I don't know. Like, just like you learn from your failures, your shortcomings, and you have to be willing and able to adjust and grow to advance. The worst is if you just you have blinders on and you're like, you don't admit that you could ever be wrong, or that you're too embarrassed by failing or whatever it is. And then you start like, you putting out this air of like, I don't know, like just this facade of, of like, I'm invincible, or like just a perfect person, right? Like, no one wants that. We're all human. And so being able to admit, accept, process defeat, and growing from it, I think that's the mark of a mature person. And so I think no matter how old you are, learning that, instilling that value into yourself, that's super important.
Yeah, and I always think about what Steve Nash, he used to run, now he's a coach, but before he used to run a basketball school, and he talked about how like he knew right away which kids are going to make it to the next level. Because he said who the kids that were resilient were the ones that are going to make it to the next level. The ones that were willing to, if they failed, to get back up and do it again. And then another sports analogy I always think about, it's always we always know the guys that make the first salary or first big contract, and then never do anything again. Versus those that are become like legends. It's because even when they get that first contract, they still get better. It's not like that first contract and they've like a lot of like, so I think a lot of athletes, they make that first contract and they're like rich, and now everything they worked for was that contract. Go. Whereas like like the Kobe's or LeBrons or any guy really, any like legend, they want to get better. They need to work on more stuff. Like, I can't shoot 3-pointers. Like, I need to do this. I need to be a better passer. And then they keep working on things. And, even not to bring up Lakers again, but LeBron talked about he's a better player now than when he was on the Heat. And I don't know if that's true, but physically I think he is, but he was better before. But I think mentally, he's just a lot stronger now. What happened to him against Dallas wouldn't happen again anymore, right? He couldn't be punked out of a series, basically. In that series, right? They just they hit him and they bothered him and they made him pass the ball. And now that wouldn't happen. He could do that for a quarter or whatever, half, but an entire game, like, they can't do that anymore,
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I used to, I was of the camp that LeBron was. He had, despite being this physical specimen and, just clearly better than everyone else, just from natural raw ability. Like we used to joke that he, during crunch time, he developed shingles because it's like he choked. He clamped up. He'd pass the ball. He'd never want to step up and take the big shot. He'd miss all these free throws, like, all these things. Like, he just wasn't clutch. And I think he's developed the clutch gene, and or whatever that you want to call that. And so even for someone as great and, legendary as him, like, there were shortcomings that he recognized. I don't know necessarily you want to embrace and revel in your shortcomings, but he acknowledged them and he said, I got to work on these things and get better. And so even now at the old age of 35, it's all relative, right? I definitely think he's way better than he was, even 5, 6, 7 years ago. So,
and I mean, the last thing about LeBron is that I think that one of the most amazing things about him was that he lived up to his hype. That a lot of people especially if you call yourself the chosen one, or the king, you live like, most people, how many baby Jordans were there, right? How many like little Kobe's are there? That never lived up to that because they could never live up to kind of what hype. But he had a big hype too, right? He was on cover of SI and at like 16 already, and he was a guy, and the fact that he lived up to, that takes a lot of work. People think that it's just that you're just given that, and in many ways he was, but then at some point he had to make it happen, right?
No, for sure. I mean, LeBron, I'm we're around the same generation age, I think, and I grew up a Jordan person, and I when LeBron came on the scene, I was like, he's not Jordan. He's not Jordan.
No.
There's no way. Jordan's GOAT. And now I'm like, it's still debatable who's the better player, but I think as an overall package, LeBron is now superseded Jordan because, Jordan was spotless 6-0 in his finals appearances, but there were plenty of seasons he didn't get to the finals.
Yeah. And
LeBron has been to way more finals now. So every team he goes to is a finalist. And then you talk about the off-court stuff. Like it's not even there's no comparison.
Yeah.
I mean, LeBron is using his platform in such a meaningful way that, of course, it's a different time now. But I would say even back in Jordan's era, it's not like you couldn't be a spokesperson or an advocate for different causes. Because, look, I mean, Muhammad Ali, Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the 60s and, earlier were doing things that Jordan kind of shied away from in his time. And then that LeBron now is obviously doing in spades. Yeah. So he's really, so you talk about the complete package, like he is GOAT by far.
Yeah. And the voting thing he's doing now, right? All those.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. All right. Well, let's hear the next piece of advice.
So my next piece of advice is, I think you need to also, maybe ties into some of the other points I've talked about already, but definitely get outside your comfort zone. Not just the whole listening to other opinions and stuff like that, but every opportunity you can, travel. Go to a different part of the country. Make friends with people you wouldn't otherwise, who are very different from you. You just want to stretch yourself in all different ways. I think that just definitely I've learned it's opened up my mind. It's made me a more whole, complete person. It's also just good for your soul in terms of seeing different cultures and different art and different films and learning a different language and if you're just so centric to your city, your culture, your community, it's important to remember where you came from and to honor that and cherish it and value and respect and all that. But it's also important to I feel to go out and spread your wings, and then you come back. Maybe you don't come back, but if you come back, you bring experiences and ideas to those around you to help open their minds up too. I too often again, times are changing now, so I think the opportunities are there more for kids, but my high school class, I look back on it and a very small percentage of them actually even left my hometown.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, and so a lot of folks went to the state school nearby or whatever, and I happen to come from the Silicon Valley, so it's a good place to live, and a lot of folks don't want to leave, but you hear that about a lot of other places, no matter where you are in the U.S. They just don't leave their nest, right? And I'm not even talking about staying at their parents' home, God forbid, for life, but just their community. And there's I get it. People have responsibilities. It's not that it's easier said than done, but if you have the ability and the opportunity to get out, see the world, and just soak that all in, I think that will do wonders for everything. That it'll wind up just making you a more interesting person. You'll have more, I don't know, things to talk about as when you're out and about being social. I think career-wise, whatever you wind up doing, it could come in really handy. It expands your network. Yeah. You wind up meeting people and they become lifelong friends, on the other side of the planet or whatever, and so it's just nothing but positive in terms of opening up your eyes and your world to so many different things. So I encourage that to happen, as soon as you can.
Yeah. I've shared this a couple of times on this podcast, but I'll share it again. Is one of my friends, when I was young, he's an asshole. He was basically an asshole, and he but his grandpa died, and his grandpa left him a ton. I mean, like super, super wealthy, left him a ton of money. But the only stipulation, because I think his grandpa, I secretly think his grandpa knew that he was a dick. And his stipulation on the money was that he had to, for 6 months, he had to travel by himself around the world, touch every continent except for Antarctica. And he had to go by himself. And he had to prove that he was by himself and traveling. And so he did it. At first, he didn't want to go, but then he did it because it was like enough money to like want to do it. And he did it.
Uh-huh.
And he came back a totally different guy. Like he was like
Wow.
a way better guy. He like was nicer, more humble. And now the irony is that he had. Oh, did I lose you? The irony he has more money. That he had more money now after that. But he was also just like he totally was like much cooler. I think it just like you said, it opened up his perspective. It opened up his life. I mean, just going from like he had no like he couldn't travel with money too. That was the thing. So he only had a small stipend, and so he was only like he could only stay at like hostels and making friends, you know, along the way that were totally different background that he was. You know, 'cause he came from a really wealthy neighborhood and he was used to a certain lifestyle, but now all of a sudden he couldn't have that lifestyle. But and he was in he was in the Philippines, he'd be in Thailand and in Africa, all over Africa for him. So I always look at his experience and think like, wow, like it totally made him a good guy at the age of like 19 and 20, as opposed to having to like,
wow.
And if he lived there, if he lived, all his life and just did his thing, he'd still probably be the same guy,
Right. Totally.
And I always think about that guy.
Kudos to his grandfather, for giving him that gift. 'Cause that, obviously changes his life on. I'm a strong believer in that. I've had the fortune of being able to travel the world, not everywhere extensively, but I've been to a good number of places. And I always say, every time I come back from a place, it's just, I feel like a better person just for having, and it's what you do there, obviously too, like the people you meet, the experiences you have. But I think if you're a curious person who has an open mind and, you apply yourself, like, all of those opportunities are only going to like set you up for more, and better reasons. And
even my son and I, we traveled this year we're doing a road trip during COVID, and we were traveling to all these really small towns in California. And for him, like I was using it as a learning tool. Like, hey, look around. Like this is like the small town where everything is shuttered, and I'm like, this is why like we hate each other, because they look at us in LA and they say like like you have everything and blah blah, like they don't understand like what our issues are. And when we look at them, because we don't think about small town, a lot of us don't think about these little towns, right? That and I think that like that for us to see that and be there. I mean, we were in this one town in Northern California that was like everything was closed, not just COVID closed, it was like boarded up and closed for like years. And I talked to people and they're like, it hasn't, like, there's like there's like a market and there's like a Mexican restaurant in this like, and like, it's really sad to see, like where it used to be like 2 or 3 block town, it was like two mark, and just like, wow, this is kind of what America's happening. And going back to Andrew, that's what I really appreciated about Andrew that's what he was talking about. That's why like the UBI came up, right? Was because he's looking at everything like why everything's going to the coast or in Chicago and like everywhere else is kind of dying. And how do we, and there's no wonder why people in those towns are angry or don't want things to go back to the way they were, make America great again. That's what they're talking about. They're they're not talking really about like racism, which is what we're thinking, like make America great was terrible, like 50 years ago. Terrible for us. But for them, they're thinking like when their town was healthy and they had jobs that they could live on, right? They could send their kids to school and colleges and and that they felt safe, right?
Yep. But it's I mean, spot on. I mean, even staying with Andrew for a second, like one of his like proposals was to have kids, or once you get to a high school age, at least, like he encourages more exchange, cross state border, kind of thing. Like we should send kids off to another place to spend a significant amount of time and get to learn each other, just within our own country. Right. To exchange ideas and just to get people more comfortable, because we're so divided now. Like, I mean, he's thinking in a very ideal fashion, which is classic him, but it's like, it all makes sense. It's the only way we're going to, again, move forward or become better as people. But if we're short of that, like the best we can do as parents is like do it on our own in our small fashion, and at least help contribute to making around us, in our personal zones and our families, better people and better places. So, so the more we do that, I think at least we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's hear your last piece of advice.
Okay.
No worries.
All right.
Your last piece of advice?
So my last piece of advice is pretty simple. It's the word hustle. So I am a strong advocate of, like I said at the top, that you can't blueprint your life. Like literally, there's no roadmap and you'll never adhere to it, even if you try. But the one thing that you need to do is continue to always try to move forward, and so I'll give you an example. Like for me, I'm, in pursuing like a producing career, like any fledgling producer at the beginning, you're like, oh, I don't, what do I do? Like you learn nuts and bolts and stuff, but then it's like, well, how do I really thrive? And I would say that any success I've had, and that's debatable how, whether I've had success, but like any project I've been able to accomplish or fulfill has, I would say like the majority of it has come just because I've hustled. I've like chased an opportunity. I'll go to, every time I feel like, I don't really feel like going to this film festival or this market. And then I force myself to do it. I wind up meeting someone or something happens that just by being present, it made all the difference. And so, you need to put yourself out there, because a lot of what you do in life is based on relationships. And so if you're kind of a hermit or an introvert and you're like, I don't do mixers, I don't like to socialize, I just kind of want to, be in my cubby hole and do my own thing. I mean, look, if you're a writer, if you're I don't know, like someone that a career that's like that, where that like merits that kind of like, attitude or that environment, great. But even as a writer, you have to at some point go out and interface with people, and sell yourself and sell your work. So I feel like, a lot of times, I'll be the first to admit this, it isn't like necessarily based on, I think there is definitely a level of aptitude that's married with, like just sort of like luck and timing, right? And that's, you create your own luck, you create your own timing. But a lot of times the best, most talented person doesn't get the, doesn't win in the end or doesn't get their project greenlit because they just didn't know how to like be out there and sort of like talk the talk and in addition to walking the walk, right? So I think there is that side of things is often like undervalued, is just like knowing how to sort of be a people person and just constantly be in motion, and like driving yourself, even if you don't feel like doing it, even if it's like every time in particular, it's one thing if it's like, oh, it's in your neighborhood and you're like, I'm too lazy to even just roll down the street. But I'm talking like every time I'm kind of on the fence of like, I don't really feel like going to this festival that requires travel this year, and then you're like, oh, I'll suck it up and like make the arrangements and, eat it on the costs and stuff. And then it's just like something good happens, so like, or it plants seeds. So like, I think that a lot of times, you make your bed, you lay in it, that kind of thing. And so like by going out there and just like really sort of pitching yourself and not being shy and like just constantly like propelling, what it is you're trying to achieve. I think that makes a huge difference, between not getting to your goals or just being stagnant, and stuck in the mud.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, one of the things I learned at USC when I was there in the writing program was I wasn't the most talented writer. I realized that pretty quickly, that I wasn't the best writer there, but I wasn't the worst either, but I wasn't the best. And you will learn right away that, that there's other factors in success, right? What is it like? It's hard work, it's luck, it's who but a lot of the luck is because like I knew a lot of my other writing friends, like the writers in the program, weren't going out to event. they weren't willing to send query letters, or they didn't go to pitching things, and they didn't work on sets. They were just writing in their room. And that was one of the things I learned, was that I was willing to do all those things, even if they weren't. And so even if I wasn't as great of a writer as that they were, ultimately I got, I was more successful than them because I was willing to do the work. And that taught me a lot in terms of just having to hustle, and that's so when I teach writing, screenwriting classes, I always tell it's not all about talent. Like, you can't be a totally untalented person, but that's not the only thing that separates. Like, one of my ex-girlfriend in the program was probably the best writer I've ever met, ever. And she's never written anything. Like, nobody ever could read what she wrote, because she's not willing to put herself out there. She's not willing to do the work, the hustle that you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, you got to do it in a way that's respectful and not overbearing, and just like, be common sense. Like, just, when to push on something and when not to, when you're not welcome.
Yeah.
But I think, like 9 times out of 10, a little effort goes a long way. And so
it's like those incel dudes. They just, all they do is they complain about women, but they've never just talked to, like, they just never talk to women. They just, like, they look at them from afar and they love them from afar. Then they wonder why, like, and then they're so creepy, and then they don't just go talk to them or talk to other people, and then all of a sudden all women are terrible because this one woman rejected them. The one time they talked to somebody they're staring at, like, you wonder why they're, you wonder why they, like, they don't have any, like, people, because they're just people, they're just other people. But they get so, like, in their heads about it, and they're not trying, and ultimately it's that effort, it's that being respectful, like you said. You can't just be like a jerk about it, right? But you have to try, you have to put it out there, things don't magically happen in other words.
Totally. Like, you'd be surprised how many times people are receptive to a query letter, right? Like, oh, this person took time to reach out to me. I was in their position once. So like obviously don't count on that happening, but you never get anywhere if you don't try. And so like, it happens more often than you think that people actually respond, or will remember you, like, if you make an impression of some sort, even if it's not for this particular, period of time down the road. So
exactly.
So that's absolutely a key to life.
Well, thank you. I love all your advice, and I love hearing your daughter in the background. I think it's great.
Sorry, she's already saying no to everything I suggest.
Mine did that a while ago too. So, but thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast, and please tell a friend about about this podcast, and make sure to listen to my other podcasts, Midnight Watchers with Jennifer Field and Quentin Lee, and my and the other one that I do, Best or Worst, with Martin Mapoma. So thank you, Brian, again, and thank you, everybody. Peace out. Bye.
Thanks, Koji.